previous video, I restored this Pioneer CT-110 cassette deck, and I mentioned at the time that it had originally been part of a component system, and that was the reason for its unusual 20 volt DC input. And at the time I also said that I wasn't really interested in the rest of the system, which comprised a amplifier and a tuner. But I changed my mind, and here it is. And while it looks like these are separate units, they're actually in the same cabinet. This was stored in exactly the same incredibly dusty environment that the tape deck had been. But while the tape deck was pretty clean inside because it had no ventilation holes, the amplifier, of course, does have them. So I'm expecting it to be pretty bad in there. It's certainly pretty bad on the outside. We also have some damage to the speaker ports here. There are bits broken off the top. Two of the terminals are missing. This one doesn't seem to work very well. So I think these are going to need replacing. Here's the power takeoff for the cassette deck, which terminates in this plug here. And as you can see, the whole thing is in very poor condition. I haven't tested it yet. For all I know, it doesn't even work. But even if it does, it needs a lot of work to get it back up to cosmetic parity with the cassette deck. I'm hoping it's worse than it looks. I mean, most of this dust should come off pretty easily. But it's what's inside that I'm slightly concerned about. And this unit is labelled as the TA-110L. The tuning indicator still moves pretty smoothly, as does the volume knob. It's got a phono preamp by the looks of things, which is useful. Then buttons for FM AM, medium long wave selector, and there's no actual tape input button, so presumably you just have to put in the tape monitor. And we have a loudness button, which is always a bit strange. Well, the first thing we're going to do is get the vacuum cleaner out and remove as much of the surface dust as possible. We can see there's also a 20 volt output for a turntable, which is labelled here as the PL110. So it might be worth eBaying that to see if I could get hold of that as well. There is one on eBay, with the buyer issuing a warning that it only works off a 20 volt supply, but it is fully working apparently, so that's worth considering. I'm going to clean up the power cable first, and this plug will need changing because it doesn't have insulation on the pins here, which means it's no longer legal in the UK. By the way, I just cleaned all the interconnects with soapy water. I'll let them dry out. I've got loads of these, but it's nice to keep things original, and these probably are the original ones. Right, let's see what delights we have in here. I expected dust, and I wasn't wrong. This is going to take quite a bit of cleaning. Well, hopefully most of it's loose and can just be vacuumed up. Obviously there's a limit to how far you can go with a vacuum, but it's certainly looking a lot better. There are areas I can't get to, but I think it's worth plugging it in now and seeing if we have any function. I said earlier that this plug was illegal. I should have said not up to current standards, so it's fine to use temporarily just to test it. Okay, we're plugged in. Let's see if anything happens. we have a light that appears to be the only light on the whole device, which is unusual. I do have a headphone jack, so I can test it with that. Okay, FM. I can hear some crackling, but nothing else. Oh, there are other lights. I have a tuning light. I don't have an aerial attached. Well, I'm getting something. I've got a stereo light. Actually sounds pretty good. I'm getting a lot of interference on the left channel. And this is the right channel, and it disappears. So I don't know whether that's just this radio station or... we might have a problem here. I think I'm going to need to try it with a different source. Okay, I've hooked up the tape deck temporarily, and we've got power, which is a good sign. Sorry, that was up a bit loud. Well, it's definitely working, but it doesn't sound good at all. The balance control isn't working properly. I can hear it from both speakers right until the very end, and then it's left only. Same with the right. So there's something going on there. There's obviously dust in the pots. And the volume is crazy loud. It was on 1 out of 10. That's as loud as I would want it, listening through headphones. It's hard to describe to you what I'm hearing. It's just, it sounds muddy. I don't think it's the tape, although this track sounds better. The Walker Brothers. The loudness button has no effect. I think that only works with FM. Just want to see what's going on under this access panel. I suppose it's to give you access to replace the capacitors without having to take the whole board out, but I'm not sure it really helps me. Fortunately, you can download the service manual for this, which includes restringing the tuner stringy thing. Right, I've managed to get the front panel off. I did it off camera because it was a bit of a faff. I had to take all these retaining nuts off the pots, and when I pushed the tuning knob through, it disconnected. Whoop! It disconnected the string here, and these LEDs here were just clipped in, as was this button here. So now the front panel is completely free. I did snap this post here just as I was taking it off. That engages with this switch here, but I don't think that's going to be a big problem. I've still got the piece, so I can glue that back on. There's a retaining clip here which I should be able to lever off. I can remove this. I mean, all I'm trying to do here is to get access to clear up some more of this dust. So I can remove this as well. So now I can vacuum in here. Okay, I've sprayed up the potentiometers. They seem to be moving a bit more freely now. And I removed the transformer and vacuumed under there. What else did I do? I cleaned up all the knobs because they were looking terrible. I've cleaned up the main case and did a bit more vacuuming where I could. So it's starting to come together. Next I'm going to clip off this rivet so that I can remove the damaged speaker terminals and get those measured up, see if I can order a replacement. I'm going to see if I can snip it off with some side cutters rather than drill it out, because that will be easier. Well, I've got it out. I should have drilled it, but it's not too bad. The damage on the outside isn't too bad. These are the damaged terminals, but annoyingly it looks like the whole, it's just one continuous piece of plastic all the way through. This is where the phono inputs and outputs are. And here is where the 20 volt outputs are. And I don't think that's a join, that's just a ridge. So yeah, that could be tricky to replace. Another problem is that I would need to get to the underside of the board in order to solder new ones on. Which might be possible if I remove the back panel. Well, that was actually easier than expected. Just remove these 5 screws. Maybe I'm stupid, but I can't figure out how to release this cable grip, so I think I am going to have to desolder it. Wow, they were really wrapped around there, so that was quite tricky. So this is what we're looking at. This has just completely fallen off. I may be able to cut this here and fit a replacement. And I can just about lift the board enough to get underneath, I think, to solder. But it's going to be tricky. I've just discovered that I can actually lift the whole panel out now. I took a couple of screws out of the PCB and yeah, I have complete access underneath for cleaning, which is good, and also for soldering in the new terminals. Time for more vacuuming. I have ordered these replacement speaker terminals. They're slightly different. These are spring clips rather than lever clips, but the measurement is roughly the same. So they're coming today. So my plan is to cut down here as neatly as I can, probably with a Dremel. Just desolder these legs, and then I'm going to have to adapt the new one when it comes. I've got 5 of them coming in a pack, so I've got plenty of scope for mistakes, and hopefully I can make it fit. Okay, that's not too bad. I can just file this down to neaten it up a bit. One of the antenna sockets is missing a lever, so I'm going to see if I can repurpose this one from the speaker terminal. Sorry, I wasn't recording, but that actually slots in there nicely. I've neatened this up as best I can. I know it doesn't look very neat, but from the front it's fairly square. While I'm waiting, I'm going to repair this piece here. This little bit broke off earlier. I'm going to stick it back on. Just going to apply some super glue with a toothpick. Just going to change the plug. So the new plugs have this insulation on the pin, so that if it's hanging half out of the socket, you don't grab it and touch the live conductor. I've just shortened the wires because previously the cord grip was gripping onto the single insulation rather than the outer insulation. And I've also tinned them up with solder, which isn't necessary, but it just stops any strands of copper going stray. It's a very old fuse, but obviously still working. Just turned it around so you can read the rating on the front. There, much safer. The new terminals have arrived, but they're quite different, so it's going to take a bit of adaptation to get them to fit. first I'm going to need to cut both of the ends off, but even after that the pins don't align to the existing holes very well at all. So I'm going to need to enlarge these slots, maybe cut the ends of the pins off, move them over and then solder across, because these aren't going to bend very well because they're flat. Anyway, I'll figure something out and show you when I've done it. Right, I've cut the ends off the terminals, and I've also bent the pins at the back so that they fit the holes, and so it now slots into place quite snugly against the power jacks here, and you can see it doesn't quite sit flush with the board, but I think once that's soldered in place that will stabilize it a bit. And I can also apply some adhesive here. I am going to have to modify the back panel though, because it projects further this way than the previous one did. Right, I shaved a bit more off the plastic at the bottom and now it does sit flush. So that should be a much better fit. I've marked on the case the extra piece I need to cut out to accommodate the new terminals. It's not going to look great, but I have no choice. Well, I've done that, and the back panel now fits on okay, except that there's not enough clearance for the springs to press down. So you wouldn't be able to get the speaker wires in. So I'm going to have to do something with the bottom of this panel here. I just snipped down here a little bit and bent this back. So this is now bent inwards, and that's just given me enough clearance to operate these properly. I finally figured out this cord grip. You have to take the whole thing out by squeezing it, and then this pops out, giving you access to the cord. So I'm gonna, because this didn't desolder very cleanly, I'm just gonna extend that a bit so that I can resolder using fresh wire. I've now stripped these wires back and tinned them in this hooked position so they're easier to wrap around the terminals. Those are now resoldered, so I can now attempt to refit the back panel. And like an idiot, I forgot to feed the cable through the panel first. But instead of desoldering it, I can just undo it from the plug end. Lucky I tinned the wires in here, I think. And with the back panel on, I think it's all looking okay. These seem pretty solid. They're kind of wedged in now by the panel, so there's no play there at all. They open fully. I've hooked up a couple of speakers and I'm going to try it with a cassette. This, I think, is the tape monitor. Okay. Oh, volume, need to turn that down. All right. It's working. The balance pot is still not great. But maybe that's just how it always was. Okay, I think I'm happy to put this back together. Just wondering what this was for. Is it shielding? It's made of aluminium. I don't have a rivet gun, so I'm gonna use a small bolt to put it back on with. So I'm not really convinced I need it. Do you remember that part I broke off earlier? Well, I managed to break it off again, and the other one. Good work. So the reason I broke those tabs again was that this linkage arm wasn't snapping into it. So when this piece is stuck to the back of the button, this arm is meant to come down and clip on like that, but pressing it down, like forcing that down, just broke it off. So I think I'm going to remove this lip so that it just sits in there, because I don't think it's going to jump out. I'm having a bit of a nightmare with this switch. I've glued them back on. I've added some super glue and baking soda to try and stiffen it up, and it is quite solid, but because it needs to clip onto this arm, I'm going to swap it with one of these other switches, so the stronger one is more active. This one can just be used to push these buttons, which don't require as much force. And in attempting that, I've completely snapped another one. I think these have just got brittle over time. I don't think I'm being particularly heavy-handed, so I'm going to have to do another swap and hope this one glues together okay. Okay, I think I've got away with it. This is the one I just showed you that I broke. That's now stuck. This is the one with the arms repaired. And this is the one I've swapped out. And I've removed those little ridges. So this now slots easily into place. And from the front, they all look fine. It worked. This is the one with the linking arm. Now I can add these nuts to all the potentiometers. Well, I can't put it off any longer. The thing that's been worrying me the most is all of this, which came unspooled, and I've got no idea how it goes back together. What the hell was that from? Oh, yeah, that hook's behind there. I do have that diagram in the service manual, and it does give instructions, but they seemed a bit confusing at the time. Well, it's a simple 14-step process, but the diagram is certainly helpful. Do you know what? I think I've done it. Seems to be working. Let's give it a try.
How good was Venby in session tonight? Richard and Cornwall loving that one, that MIA mashup. One of the best things I've had in my ears.
But now, The World Tonight is coming up in half an hour here on Radio 4. And to tell us more,
Radio 4, okay.
Hello Amanda, yes, President Biden has just landed in Belfast for a flying visit to Northern Ireland to mark the 20th.
I'm not sure of the frequency of Radio 4, but if it's around about
to the Republic of Ireland
94, then
speaking to a former US envoy to Northern Ireland, find out why it's
then I'm okay. There you go, 92 to 95 FM, and we are about 94, so perfect.
Well, if you ever come back to Vancouver, I'd love to take you butthole sunning.
And that's 103.9, which is Radio Suffolk. Tone controls work. Excellent. And we're done. I'm really pleased with how this turned out. The speakers are working perfectly. The repair worked well. It's cleaned up really nicely. I love the aesthetic of it, especially now that it's reunited with the cassette deck. I don't think I'll bother getting the turntable, but you never know. And thanks for watching.